1 Corinthians 14:1. Follow after love, and desire spiritual gifts, but rather that you may prophesy. There again, that side of prophesying. That's even greater than speaking in other tongues. So if you're prophesying and you've never spoken in tongues, that's a greater sign anyway. The fact that we're taught that you have to speak in tongues to have the Holy Spirit is not true, not according to the Scriptures. If you prophesy, you know that you got it. For he that speaks in an unknown tongue speaks not unto men, but unto God. Now this is talking about the main flow of tongues. There are actually three different flows. There's the one that happened on Shavuot, Pentecost, when Pentecost had fully come. Now the reason I brought up the original Pentecost was there were basically 70 nations that were represented there. We came out of Egypt as a mixed multitude. 70 nations with 70 languages. Everybody heard the Torah in their own language. When the Father spoke the Torah, we all heard him. We knew what the 10 words were. It was the same miracle manifest when Pentecost had fully come. There were about 120 of us in the upper room when the Holy Spirit was poured out. Well, there were people from all over the world at Shavuot, the Jews that had come back for the Feast of Shavuot. At least 70 nations, again, were represented. Everybody heard them in their own tongue. Now, if we were actually speaking the different languages, that would be less than 2 people speaking each individual language. It would be almost impossible in a crowd to be able to pick out 2 people and hear the message in your own language. I believe what happened was basically what happened at Mount Sinai. Everybody's ears were opened and they all heard the words in their own language. That's more than likely what actually happened. So this gift of tongues that happened then, the miracle of it was, not only did they speak in tongues, but everybody heard them in their own language. It's not normally like that. In 1 Corinthians 14:1 again, or verse 2, it says, For he that speaks in an unknown tongue speaks not unto men, but unto God, for no man understands him. If the gift of tongues is the gift of language, that can't be true. That's obviously showing us that it's not just a gift of language. It's the gift of tongues, the main flow. No man understands it, because you're speaking directly to God. It's your spirit man speaking to God. Howbeit in the Spirit he speaks mysteries. But he that prophesies speaks unto men, to edification, exhortation, and comfort. So prophecy is a supernatural utterance that comes from God that's in the language of the people that you're speaking to, that they can all understand, so that they're all edified. That's the difference. He that speaks in an unknown tongue edifies himself. There is purpose in it. It supercharges us in the Spirit. It's like plugging into the electric socket. It gives you the power, the juice. Paul told Timothy, stir up the gift that's in you by the laying on of my hands. This was one of the ways that he could do it, was by praying in the Spirit, praying in other tongues. He could stir up that gift that was within him. So when we speak in another tongue, the man that does that edifies himself. He that prophesies edifies the assembly, because everybody can understand him. I would that you all spoke with other tongues, but rather that you prophesy. He's not against speaking with other tongues. He wishes that everybody would. But even more so, he wishes that everybody would prophesy. For greater is he that prophesies than he that speaks with tongues, except he interpret, that the assembly may receive edifying. So he's talking about specifically when we're in assembly together, like we are today, that speaking in other tongues, it's worthless unless there's an interpretation. Prophesying, speaking supernaturally a word from the Lord is beneficial to everybody because everybody understands it. So he would rather have us prophesying. Now, brethren, if I come unto you speaking with tongues, what shall I profit you, except I shall speak to you either by revelation, or by knowledge, or by prophesying, or by doctrine? Even things without life, giving a sound, whether pipe or harp, except they give a distinction in the sound, how shall it be known what is piped or harp? If you take a musical instrument, give it to a toddler, and he just sits there and strums the strings, he's not making music, he's just making noise. You've got to have specifics there for it to be music, to know what's going on. For if the trumpet gives no uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself for the battle? So likewise you, except you utter by the tongue words easy to be understood, how shall it be known what is spoken? For you shall speak into the air. There are, it may be, so many kinds of voices in the world, and none of them is without signification. We read in 1 Corinthians 13:1, though I speak with the tongues of men or of angels. Sometimes maybe it is the tongues of men. I mean, when we're talking to one another or prophesying, it's the tongues in other tongues, he calls it the tongues of angels. Nobody understands it. No man understands it. So there's many voices in the world, and none of them are without signification. Therefore, if I know not what the meaning of the voice, I shall be unto him that speaks a barbarian, and he that speaks shall be a barbarian unto me. We need to be able to communicate. Jabbering back and forth to each other in other tongues does nothing. You might think it's impressive, but it's really foolishness. Even so, you, for as much as you are zealous of spiritual gifts, seek that you may excel in the edifying of the assembly. That is the main purpose of why we're supposed to be desiring these spiritual gifts, is for the edification of the whole assembly, not just for ourselves. Wherefore, let him that speaks in an unknown tongue pray that he may interpret. For if I pray in an unknown tongue, my spirit prays, but my understanding is unfruitful. There again, I don't even know what I'm saying if I'm speaking in another tongue. You don't know. No man understands it. What is it then? I will pray with the Spirit, and I will pray with the understanding also. So he's contrasting praying in the Spirit with praying with the understanding. So obviously praying in the Spirit is praying in other tongues in context. I will sing with the Spirit, and I will sing with the understanding also. Else, when you shall bless with the Spirit, how shall he that occupies the room of the unlearned say, Amen? As thy giving of thanks, seeing that he understands not what you're saying. You're saying it well, you're being edified, you're blessing the Father, but the guy next to you has no idea what you're saying, so it's kind of worthless to him. For you verily give thanks well, but the other is not edified. I thank my God, I speak in tongues more than you all. So Paul did not neglect this gift. He was speaking in tongues. These guys were abusing it. They were speaking in tongues a lot. Paul did it more than them, because there's benefit to it. It edifies you. It builds you up. Yet in the church or in the assembly, I'd rather speak 5 words with my understanding, that by my voice I might teach others also, than 10,000 words in an unknown tongue. Brethren, be not children in understanding. How be in malice, be ye children, but in understanding be men, be mature. In the Torah it is written, with men of other tongues and other lips will I speak unto these people, and yet for all that will they not hear me, says Yahweh. This is quoting Isaiah that we talked about before. Wherefore tongues are for a sign, not to them that believe, but to them that believe not. This was the sign it's talking about that happened at Shavuot. Everybody heard the Father in their own language. So this was a sign to the unbelievers. But prophesying serves not for them that believe not, but for them which believe. It's for the assembly. The believers in the assembly is what prophesying is for. If therefore the whole assembly be come together into one place, and all speak with tongues, and there comes in those that are unlearned or unbelievers, they will say that you're crazy. It's foolishness. It might be edifying you, and you guys might know what each other are doing, but somebody that doesn't understand comes in, you guys are nuts. That's what it looks like. That's why we're not supposed to do it in the assembly unless there's an interpretation. But if all prophesy, and there comes in one that believes not, or one unlearned, he is convinced of all, he is judged of all. And thus are the secrets of his heart made manifest. And so falling down on his face, he will worship God and report that God is in you of a truth. This is like a word of wisdom or word of knowledge, where basically you're reading his mail. He knows that only God can show you that. So he knows that this is God. Amen. And thus are the secrets of his heart made manifest. How is it then, brethren, when you come together? Every one of you has a song, has a doctrine, has a tongue, has a revelation, has an interpretation. Let all things be done unto edifying. We're all supposed to come with something. We're supposed to come to the meeting stirred up. But in order for that to happen, we've all got to have the Holy Spirit. And we all have to ask for it. So this is something that we've got to do. He wants us to all have something. If any man speaks in an unknown tongue, let it be by 2, or at the most by 3, and that by course, and then let one interpret. So you can have people praying in tongues, and giving forth a message. You'll know in your heart if it's something that's supposed to be spoken out loud, and then there's one that will interpret it. But if there's no interpreter, let him keep silence in the assembly, and let him speak to himself and to God. So when we're in the assembly, he's saying just speak quietly to yourself.